How does the court develop and synthesize competing arguments between Tinker and Des Moines? In this lesson, you will learn to analyze how two central ideas develop over the course of a text by explaining how the author structures the argument. Let's review. In argumentative writing, the author's job is to hold up or prove an opinion. One of the most important choices the writer makes is how they're going to hold up their opinion. In the case of Tinker versus Des Moines, the court is challenged with defending both sides of the argument. They need to decide how they're going to uphold their decision to support Tinker while still developing the case of the other side, the defendant Des Moines. In the case of the Supreme Court, they are provided with all of the evidence. Their job is to decide how are they going to organize this information to prove their point. The way that the author organizes their writing is called text structure. Writers can choose from a variety of common text structures, such as cause and effect and compare and contrast. First, we're going to highlight two competing ideas addressed in the text: the beginning, middle, and end. Second, we're going to create a timeline by making notes about how both ideas developed across the text. Third, we're going to ask ourselves, what text structure did the court use to develop both ideas into a single argument? First, I'm going to look in the beginning of the text. Here, I'm only going to highlight places where I see competing arguments and later make notes about what those arguments are. So first, I see the court uphold the authority of the school officials, and the competing idea is the rights of the students when they collide with school authorities. In the middle of the text, these ideas come up again. They first bring up the action of the school authorities, and second, the ways that they do not overcome freedom of expression for students. In the end of the text, the court again addresses what are the rights of principals during school days and school activities, and second, what are students' rights to express their opinion during the operation of school days. Now I'm going to create a timeline by making notes about how each idea developed in the beginning, middle, and end of the text. Here, the court says that they affirm the authority of states and school officials. Here they say authorities are entitled to enforce rules. The competing idea is that what about when rules come into competition with First Amendment rights of students? The competing idea is that students are entitled to freedom of expression. The author develops these ideas in the middle of the story by getting further into the evidence that in the case of Tinker versus Des Moines, their school authorities' action could be seen as reasonable because there are situations where authorities can compromise First Amendment rights for safety reasons. They also acknowledge that it cannot be any reason. They say undifferentiated fear or apprehension is not enough to overcome right to freedom of expression. So I'll make the note that the threat has to be real and apparent. In the end of the text, the court acknowledges, okay, first of all, schools exist to conduct specific activities, and they have the right to make sure that those specific activities are happening. However, They don't see any reason why students may not include First Amendment rights as part of the school activities, that First Amendment rights are actually an integral part of school activities that shouldn't interfere with appropriate discipline in the school. So, what text structure is the author using in the beginning of the text? Well, I noticed that the author is talking about what both authorities and students are entitled to. So the text structure that seems to be in play here is compare and contrast. The court is comparing and contrasting the rights each side is entitled to. In the middle of the text, the author then talks about safety. Safety of authorities and how that applies to students. Here, the court is again comparing and contrasting how the rights of each side relate to school safety. Finally, in the end of the story, the court continues to use this text structure of compare and contrast by relating all of their evidence to what types of activities students and schools are expected to conduct during the school day. The court is essentially comparing and contrasting the rights of the school and the rights of the students to partake in certain activities during school. So, how does the court develop and synthesize competing arguments between Tinker and Des Moines? In this lesson, I learned that the Supreme Court develops and synthesizes competing arguments between Tinker and Des Moines through comparing and contrasting the evidence from each side. Mainly, the court explained how the rights of students interact with the rights of school authorities in this case. First, we highlighted two competing ideas addressed in the beginning, middle, and end of the text. Second, we created a timeline, making notes about how each idea developed across the text. And third, we asked ourselves, what text structure did the court use to develop both ideas into a single argument? In this lesson, you have learned to analyze how two central ideas develop over the course of a text by explaining how the author structures the argument.